Good afternoon. Welcome to our 3 o'clock session here at PDMI East, our final session of Monday, March 14th, and the final session of our Council Education Day. The PDMI Workshop Council is proud to bring you data without apples and cookies, a discussion about data, privacy, and more. I have to give credit to the Workshop Council because they, instead of just placing themselves on the panel, went out and found 3 tremendous speakers, all of whom are from member companies of the PDMI, but not members of the council. So selfless act by the Workshop Council, and we thank them for bringing great speakers to the table. First off, before we get started, I have to do one thing, and that's thank our educational sponsor from Paymerang. Paymerang has a video to share, and we'll play that right now.
People ask me frequently, what is Paymerang and why do you use it? I tell them that Paymerang is a great way to pay your vendors, and you also get money back. And usually they're like, that's too good to be true. You've got to be kidding me. And you don't have to do all the upfront legwork. So I talk to them about it and I tell them how it works. You sign up with them. They do all the research on your vendors. You send them your vendor list. They do the research. They give you an average of what potentially your rebates may be based on that information. Then with that information, you go through it. And after you've implemented, you can see it takes away so much time from your accounts payable team. You see that you no longer have to do massive bank reconciliations. You see the amount of time that it saves your team. I don't know why anybody wouldn't use Paymerang. So when I'm talking to other CFOs or I'm talking to other controllers, I tell them why I use Paymerang and I explain the process of using it. And then most of the people want to find out about it.
Thank you again, Paymerang. I know for those of you who've been to more than one session, you probably feel like you know Kathy by now, and her excitement for our fine sponsor. So thank you, Paymerang. I'd like to introduce the panel. We have right here, Daniel Alfonso is the Director of IT for Digital Target Marketing. We have Brian Handrigan, the co-founder and CEO of Advocado, and we have Michael Weinstein, the owner of Jam Direct, who is your moderator, who's going to take us all the way through this panel. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And thank you to the PMI. I'll give a little bit more of an introduction on each of us. So a lot of you know me. I am the former Chief Marketing Officer of All-Star Products Group, having launched the Snuggie and 1,000 other big as seen on TV hits that you know. I'm also a consultant currently working with a number of companies in our industry, basically an outsourced chief marketing officer. And others of you here might know me from my exciting viral hit, my wet wipe mitten that I took to market called Shittens. You can look it up. It is a real thing. Can't keep it in stock. So I'm excited to be here, and I will turn it over. I want you to get a quick introduction for Brian and Daniel. So Daniel.
I'm Daniel Alfonso. Thank you for coming and listening to us talk about data and cookies. I'm the digital target marketing's director of IT. I've been with DTM now for 12 years. They're an industry-leading agency in the DRTV space, I've learned a lot since I've been with them, excited to be here.
Yeah. And I'm Brian Handrigan. So many of you don't know me. My first PDMI was in San Diego, where we had about 4 people, I think, but it was a great time for those of us that were there. I'm new on the scene because of our new partnership and acquisition of BVS. My background is I'm first and foremost, I've spent most of my career as a marketer, right? Direct response, digital, and then moved over to TV. And at the end of the day, everything that I do and I care about and I focus on is around data. So hopefully there's some stuff that I've lived through and experienced that I'm be able to share with you all today.
Nice. Okay, so, and first of all, just to address your question, Jessica, that you said to me right before we started, no, there's no actual cookies here. Data, cookies.
I thought about bringing some.
Yeah, problem. You're going to walk out. Okay, so little background. As you know, as marketers, we're facing some new challenges. From a consumer standpoint, it's a good thing. We're offering ways for people to protect their information, their data, to have some privacy. From a marketing standpoint, it's scary. So now we're used to people visiting our websites. We follow them wherever they go, things like that. So we're going to get into that. I was actually talking with my mom a couple days ago. I told her I was going to be speaking at a session. I told her the topic. She was like, I am so happy that Google's getting rid of cookies. This is great. I need privacy. I don't need people tracking my every move. And I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on in your browser history, Mom, but I think it should be a good thing. Like, don't we want to get ads that are, following us around that are relevant to what we do? I want to see ads targeting short, white, bald, Jewish old men. That makes sense for me. Now I'm going to be running around, I'm going to get ads with like hair care products. It's going to be a disaster. So we're going to figure out how do we know, again, who our customer is, and how do we do it in a manner that, again, makes people feel comfortable, because we're not going to convince people otherwise. So before we get into it, let's start with a couple of definitions. I don't want to be presumptuous and assume that everybody even knows the details of what cookies are, other than we know that they're important and somehow it tells people what we do. So Daniel, a little kind of basic definition on cookies and the difference of like first-party cookies, third-party, if you could give us, would be great.
Yeah, sure. So cookies are little bits of text that websites can give your browser when you visit their website. Many times it's like an identifier that represents you as a person, or an identifier that represents the session or that specific interaction with that website. But all subsequent requests to that website that gave you a cookie, your browser will just automatically include this when talking with that website. It's how websites keep state of you as you move around their UI. You add things to your cart. Cookies are what helps the website know that it's the same person. They can show them what was in their cart as before. That's cookies in general. First party versus third party, there's just really one clear distinction. The URL that you see in the browser bar, that's the website you're interacting with. Any cookies that URL sets for you is considered first party. You're only sharing those with that URL when you directly go and visit that website. And the whole purpose of storing the cookies is just for that one website to know who you are as you're moving around their site. Third-party cookies are something that are being set a little bit behind the scenes. There could be scripts on the page or other elements on the page that are pointing at different websites, different domains than what you see in the URL bar, that are setting cookies for you and getting cookies from you that you have already for their domain, so they can kind of watch you as you traverse around the web. Anywhere where their scripts are installed or deployed, they can see those interactions as though you're interacting with them directly. And that's really what's being targeted is third-party cookies. First-party cookies going away would break a lot of the internet and the way we work with websites. So it's that's it in a nutshell.
Thanks. Okay, so first party, I'm thinking I go to a website, I come back, it remembers all the shopping I was just doing, my language preference, all of my own personal things. Third party, I now visit another website and I'm starting to see ads following me wherever I go. Those are kind of the main differences at a high level. So, Brian, talk to us about what's actually changing when they say cookies are going away.
Sure. With the elimination of third-party cookies, browsers, so let's think of Chrome, because Chrome, right, being the biggest browser, is really driving this, is saying they're not going to support it. Meaning, right, when a cookie's trying to be set, and again, that's this idea of putting this code, right, into your browser storage or your preferences, it's not going to allow it. So you won't allow cookies to be created. And a lot of times we might think, okay, it's pretty obvious to tell when that's happening, right? I should be able to see when that's happening. And a lot of us don't know, and a lot of times actually website owners don't know in the past that it was happening, because if you think about things like social sharing widgets that people add to their websites, right? And you say, okay, I want to share, if I see a really good article and I want to share it on Facebook and I want to share it on Twitter, what's really happening, and one of the biggest players in the space for a lot of times was Share This. They weren't a social sharing technology. They were really a third-party cookie farm. They just propagated this widget all over the internet to start collecting this information and following you around. And then companies like Facebook did it too when they bought other companies that had web tracking tags. I believe they bought the company Atlas, and all of a sudden when you hear about Facebook tracking you when you're not on Facebook's website, that's how they were taking advantage of these third-party cookies to start getting a picture of consumers. And so getting rid of them, right, is simply the browser saying, nope, stop, right? You're not going to take and store data, and we're not going to share data back with you. And on the surface, it sounds kind of good, as we were talking about.
Yeah, good. So, okay, so now we know that this is happening. They've pushed the date back a few times, but they say it's coming. So I guess the big question that we have, Daniel, how is this going to impact us? What's the first thing that we should expect in terms of, they're going to flip a switch. We're now not storing these cookies. What, as marketers, should we expect as the first change?
Well, it's not going to happen overnight. It's end of 2023, I think, is what they're targeting. Google's promise is through their privacy sandbox is to develop a suite of tools to protect users' privacy, as well as give marketers and advertising technology platforms what's needed to serve relevant advertising. So it's going to be a bit of a slow burn, a slow transition period as they release their tools, which are still being developed. There's betas and some ideas being thrown around, but some of them get scrapped. Most notably, like the Flock API, which the idea behind that was to give groups of people identifiers, so you can target groups of people without knowing the individuals. But again, it just wasn't really privacy conscious enough. So they're still working this out over time. But it's undoubtable and undeniable that the data is going to be less picture perfect. They're not going to have down to the user tracking with anything other than third-party cookies or having the user give up their identity before they see the advertising. So what to expect is probably degrade in performance from things like retargeting.
Okay.
And a need to just shift, away from budgets away from that and into other relevant advertising techniques.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are really a couple of really competing objectives, right? When Google comes out and says they're going to do away with these nasty third-party cookies, right? We're going to protect consumers. That's what consumers hear. That's what legislators hear. Right, but and as a lifelong digital marketer, I start peeling back the onion, and I go, so who's really winning? Right, Google's not going to do something that's really going to hurt them, and so who does see the data? Well, Google sees the data, right? So Google's the one that's creating these interest groups. Google's the one that's creating and managing this privacy sandbox. Google's the one that's continuing to increase the height of their walled garden. Right, and as advertisers and marketers and brands, we spend all the money that creates customer engagement, yet Google's keeping all the gold, right? So just across the board, I've got a big problem, right? With as a marketer, as a person, right, just in terms of what's right, as well as really it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? We're saying we're doing something good for consumers, but we're really doing something that's good for Google. And so that's one piece of it. The other side of it, the real unintended consequences, and we were talking about that a little bit, right? Other than Michael getting, hair care products, is this whole idea of the free internet, right? Of content for advertising, and making that experience for the user effective and relevant and engaging. As soon as, I believe, right? As soon as consumers start experiencing all of these unrelevant ads that are coming in, and guess what happens? That drives up advertising cost for the advertiser, and that drives up cost for the consumer. People are going to start asking, why are we doing this? But Google's answer, we believe, is going to be, it's okay, but if you use my tools work better than all the tools out there in the marketplace. So if you come to us, we got you covered. It just sucks to be you if you're actually trying to work in an independent way. And I think that's really the end consequence here.
All right, so are we going to have to do anything different technically on the website? Do we have to go back to all of our websites and make any changes? Are you thinking that it'll be seamless?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and I'll hand it back over to you, Daniel.
Sure. I think the biggest change on your website, if you're the destination for the conversion, is to push the conversion process a little further up the funnel, do more of a soft sell, collect email, basically build a relationship with the customer before you try to yell and sell at them. Because once they leave, if they didn't give you anything to reach back out to them, it's just going to be much harder to grab them through the ad tech platforms. That is
definitely right. One effective way to deal with it. I think another way is really, and we've heard these themes, and I know I hate buzzwords, so I apologize for throwing it out there. Right, the whole Web 3.0 movement. Right, we see it, and owner actually wants to talk about it. The main gist of it is companies taking control of their data again. Right? If we just think of Web 3.0 means I control my data, That's really, in my opinion, the answer to this, right? So what are we doing with our web tracking if we're converting on the web? Are we just doing Google Analytics where we're getting less and less precise data back from them? Well, that's right. That helps them again, doesn't it? Right? We're getting less and less precise data, or are we putting together a web tracking solution that gives us the precision, that gives us the data, that can combine with other sources so that one of the reasons actually that Google keeps kicking the death of the cookie down the road is because regulators haven't accepted their answer for these privacy sandbox tools. Right? Google wanted to kill the cookie about now, but they didn't have the tools developed to allow advertisers to not become dependent on Google-based solutions. Right? So until they have these tools out and they've become acceptable out there by the regulators, Google can't kill the cookie because then they become a monopoly in that sense. So if there are, or when there are these tools, I believe the real answer is for advertisers and brands to have that source data that they use to train Google, that they use to train Facebook, that they use to train all these other platforms, and you bring it all to yourself. Don't let the walled gardens, right, lock you out of your own data.
Got it. Okay, so cookies, I'm going to get back to that in a minute. So another big thing that we all know has happened, iOS, app on iPhones and on the Mac and so forth. The whole iOS 14.5 introduced a whole new thing where we had to get permission to track, and that was supposedly, a disaster for us marketers. So, question for you: can you explain, Daniel, a little bit? Again, what exactly happened over the last couple of updates in iOS that people were concerned about? What's changed?
So basically, Apple brought front and center a user setting for sharing device ID. Device ID is the in-app equivalent of third-party cookies. It doesn't change as you move from app to app. So the advertising platforms use it to serve you relevant advertising and in-app experiences. So now, instead of it being kind of buried in the settings menu for turning that off, sharing that with apps, it happens right when you install an app or when you update an app. So when you go to install, say, Facebook, right front and center, it says, do you want to share your device ID with this app? And if they opt out of that, it's essentially the same as third-party cookies being away on the web.
Got it. Okay, so taking that same concept further, like we were with Google, every agency I'm talking with, any campaigns that I'm involved with, I'm on the phone with the digital agency. Numbers are off. Sometimes the first thing they say is it's the big update. It's doing the best we can do. The update blew everything. So again, the question is, one, is that actually true? How much longer can we use that excuse? And then what are we going to do about that? So I'll go to you first, Brian.
Sure. Well, it is definitely part of it, right? Because especially with all the buzz around the death of the cookie, if I'm sitting there and I'm unsure, and I see this alert that says, do I want to turn off, right, my advertising ID? I'm going to say, yep, right? Or then there's my location tracking. So all of our geofencing out there and all of our tracking out there, right, we're all screwed. And again, it leads to the deterioration of both the experience, right? And obviously Facebook's numbers are off, or Meta, right? Their numbers are off because they put everything in on their ability to really track you within their apps across, right, Facebook to Instagram to WhatsApp to everything that they had installed, and now they're blind to that going on. So I'd say some of it is good, but again, we have all of these unintended consequences.
Yeah. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's legit. I mean, it does make it harder to run performance-based campaigns. If you were optimizing solely off of conversion, you'll see a dip. Facebook's default attribution model changed with this update as well. There's no longer view-through conversions shown in your reporting dashboard. It's only click-through conversions, and also the conversions and the look-back window has shrunk from 28 days to 7 days. So, it's definitely going to look less performant if you're optimizing off conversions.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, if I can just jump in one more
please.
thing, Michael. So this is really interesting, right? So how many of our broadcast, right, TV advertisers do we have, right, out there that have that in the mix, right? All right. How many times have we gotten fed up? And I'm a lifelong digital marketer, by the way, that moved into the other side of analytics, right? Because of things like cookies and things like device IDs, the digital platforms always took credit for things that they could touch. So at one point of this, actually, there's, I think, potentially something positive coming out, which is a leveling of the playing field where all media channels and all campaigns are going to have to equally defend their right to that sale, and not just because I had a piece of cookie, right? That said, I touched them, so that must be mine.
Yeah, this is the right audience for that. So attribution, let's talk about that a little bit. And again, I think most people here know what we're talking about, but just to give a quick definition. So, it's the ability for us to actually track what drove an order. So if you think about TV advertising, you see a commercial on TV, obviously, if you see an 800 number, it's always unique. So we always know when we see a spot exactly what drove that phone call. On the web, however, most brands have pretty much the same URL on every commercial these days. We're not trying the thing where we have 5,000 different URL strings or /TV2 and things like that. So therefore, one, you don't know when someone saw a commercial on TV that they obviously went immediately. They might go days later, hours later. Two, maybe they didn't go straight to the website. Maybe they went to Google. Maybe they're going to do a little research, or maybe they forgot the URL. Three, maybe they went to Amazon. So this whole craziness of figuring out at the station level, and then even broader, just even the digital world, how many of us see a Facebook ad? That's great. I'm going to open up another window. I'm going to check it out on Amazon and see the reviews. And I don't even know where I end up buying half the time. So the world of trying to figure out where to keep spending money, what's working, is getting more and more challenging. So again, with this, it has another level of challenge to it. So again, I'll throw that question to you guys. Just another example, maybe some of you can relate to. Many times I'm working with a TV agency. Here I have a digital agency and then a third-party Amazon agency, and they're all reporting within the same time frame. This one got 100 orders, they got 100 orders, they got 100 orders. Awesome, we should have 300 orders, but we have like 120.
Yep.
Somebody's double counting, something's wrong. So that whole fight, again, view through, last click, first click, and all that is not going away. So I'm very curious to hear from you guys your thoughts on how will this new lockdown with privacy, how will that impact our ability to handle attribution? So, Daniel?
Now, across those channels, attribution was already a challenge with or without the third-party cookie. Third-party cookie is mostly going away, is mostly going to hurt your view touch points. You're going to give more credit, more impact to any user clicks. And them simply viewing an ad is just not going to seem as important when you look at the data. But it has to be considered because turning off those channels is going to hurt your marketing. So it's going to make your clicks the favorite when you're analyzing all your channels.
That's probably where we disagree, right? The one, because we've been very cordial, and I think you and I see eye to eye on a lot of this stuff. I think our opinion on it is, within the digital world, right, clicks are going to be the thing. But, looking at it as a holistic, I do believe it's going to drive a need to stop doing single silo attribution and measurement, right? Because people don't live in a silo. I just don't get digital. I just don't get social. I just don't get broadcast. And so that means we have to rethink the entire way we do measurement, right? All the attribution systems that we've seen over the years, right, they are trying to prove a point. Right? My TV is working because I ran a TV attribution model. My social is working because I ran a social. Well, yeah, I almost messed up my language here. Screw it all, right? No, the reality of it of the situation is consumers live in a multi-channel world. Our measurement has to understand that, and there are ways. Now they're not easy. Right? They take a lot of computing power and they take a lot of effort, but there are ways to build measurement models that can actually bring all the facets together, and then you actually don't try to prove for anything, you literally try to predict what would have happened if you removed something. The technique is called counterfactual, and it's a really effective, it's what medical studies use to prove if a drug causes cancer. Right, so it's a really well-established method, but when you apply it to marketing with multiple channels, you end up with a fairer view of what's happening. Now, what you miss, you're absolutely right, is you miss the literal chain of custody, right, from click to action. So I think the other piece that needs to really be brought forward is measurement is not a one-size-fits-all. There is, in the moment, I tend to call with my team, it's on the battlefield analytics. On the battlefield measurement gives me what's happening right now so I can make a decision right now. And then there's after-action reports that need to be perfect. But the two are not equal, and the two work together, but I think everyone's trying to take one type of measurement and apply it to all cases, and I think it needs to be changed so that we can get the right answer.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny because, right, so old school, probably some people here still do this, but we don't always have the luxury of just starting with one channel. Let's run some TV for 4 weeks. Let's get a baseline. Now we're going to slap on Facebook. Let's see the lift. Now we're going to turn on Amazon. We should do that by the time we were, 4 months in, we had some numbers, and then maybe we're already in retail, so it's a problem. So the thought now, best practice of layering everything, because we have to reach the consumer multiple touch points. And then sometimes it makes sense to pull one of those channels off. Maybe for whatever reason, it's not the best weekend to be running TV this weekend for some event that's happening or the weather, whatever. So we pause and then we start to see what happens. Or a popular case I've seen come up a lot is people trying to figure out to what extent Amazon is driving its own business versus it's coming from other channels. So the same thing. There are campaigns where we were running for months and shut everything off for whatever reason, inventory and things like that, and Amazon's still going. So now that has to be kind of built into our methodologies in terms of how we're measuring. So it's funny. I always think about the fighting for those last clicks in the orders and the reports that we all meet together, and we probably should have pre-met to figure out that the numbers didn't match. All right, so let's take it back to the privacy thing. Let's talk a little bit about retargeting. So, like we said before, from the cookie standpoint, you visit the site, you go to another site. Banner ads is one thing. Facebook, same thing. What are some of the things that we should start looking at now so that we're prepared and we're not, dependent on something that's not going to be around soon enough? So, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before, and it's a little scary to think. Maybe it seems like we're going backwards, but email is going to be the most effective way to retarget in the sense that we're used to now. As far as you left this in your cart or you were looking at this, do you want to pick that back up? When it's that specific user interaction that you want to touch on and you want to talk about with the customer. Now there's alternatives to that style of retargeting in general. Like contextual advertising, where your ad units, you start making ad units to match publisher sites or give a good mix of ad units, to your campaign, so the publisher sites can optimize and try to put something relevant on the page based on what's around it. But yeah, getting a conversation going with your user is how you'll do retargeting.
Brian?
Yeah, I'd like to say this is another one of those areas where Daniel and I agree, right? So things like email, right? So if we hear about the term CDP, or Customer Data Platform, right, you got to ask yourself, why did Avocados from Mexico, right, run a Super Bowl ad that went to a website to drive people to give them their emails, right? They don't sell directly, right? So they're trying to build these relationships so that they can continue the conversation of the brand, right, with people with permission. Right, and then on the other side, context. But again, this is where I think we have to think bigger than the web page. Right, context is more than text on a page. It's the weather outside. Right, our context today: are we having the cocktail party outside or inside? It's all because of the weather. How does that drive consumer action? Right, context, like what's going on in a sporting event or on the news. Right, so those are the types of questions we're always asking about, which is how are these other, what we kind of refer to internally as environmental influences driving customers and consumers. And if we can start mapping those correlations, then you can start learning from them, and then you can start advising on them.
Yeah, I've been hearing, and people do this already, but just like you see a lot of times the, give us your email and save X% on your first order, that kind of thing. I'm starting to see also, an incentive to allow tracking. So provide, allow us to track you, and we will give you a discount or a savings and things like that. Or take this survey so we can learn about you. You take the survey, same thing, you receive a discount, but now we've just gotten information intentionally handed over by the consumer rather than it being kind of forced or tracked without them realizing. Okay, so we
Just a quick thing, Michael.
Yeah, please.
I sat in on the, I don't know how many of you were in on the session just before ours at 1:30. Had to do with FTC, but one of the big topics that was in that session was the FTC's really putting a dark cloud over incentivizing people to let you get their data and they're calling it dark patterns. So we'll see how long we could use those techniques before they start getting kind of cannibalized on as well.
We talked about it. That's why we purposely had that session first.
That's great. Yeah, set them up.
Bring this back. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about other things that we should be looking at. Again, not tracking, but that's going to allow for a consumer-friendly experience. So influencers, what role? That's a conversation I've been having with a lot of companies where, the influencers that have their trusted followers, people that that their content resonates with them, are being now sought after even more, right? Because we know, for example, that a lot of the people that visit our pages follow certain things. If you're visiting, a product that's in the medical space, there are going to be key medical, doctors and influencers and things like that. So, question is, so you have influencers. What other areas should we now start to really put a focus on that's going to kind of allow for us to be able to follow our consumer, but allow them to be comfortable with it? So, Brian?
Got it. Yeah, so obviously the influencer piece is one, but also there's just understanding their entire engagement journey, right? We've been talking about kind of broadcast and we've been talking about web, but we haven't really been talking about connected TV, right, and OTT and the new ways that consumers are getting additional advertising. So thinking there, right, and again, it's about, I think, connecting the dots between them, right? So, for example, just kind of throwing out one hypothetical, right? So let's say we've got a brand that has a product that has a weather influence. Well, let's make sure we pump up our media buy instantly, right, when that happens. Or let's collect enough data, because let's not argue whether or not a consumer sees a commercial and goes to search, but recognize that normal pattern and start understanding and extracting those paid search keywords so we can see the difference between search patterns, right, during a micro moment, as we call it, and outside of a micro moment. And in some ways, instead of having these media channels fighting each other,
yep,
right, or looking at social as a singular, how do they work together, identify those patterns, pull data out, and then turn them into strategies so that you can engage?
Okay. Question for you, Daniel. So on the technical side, tracking. So a lot of us are running affiliate campaigns, and we have all these things appended to our URL string so that we know where things came from. With the cookies and so forth going away, does anything change in that area? Do we have to do anything differently from an execution standpoint?
Largely, no. If the tracking system's designed around clicks and adding URL parameters to the page, and the site is consuming those parameters, storing them in first-party cookies to be passed back as parameters for the conversion, largely unaffected.
Okay.
But those systems can lean on third-party cookies to make their connections. It eases integration if the operator of the website doesn't have to store and pass cookies, or if domains change through the checkout process and the thank you page is on a different domain than the original domain. That information will need to be kind of handled with care as the customer goes through the checkout process, or it will be lost with the absence of third-party cookies.
Got it. Okay. Anything else on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, just to kind of, I think to build on Daniel's point, right? I'm kind of a, talk to me like a fourth grader guy, right? So in a good way, if we think about that customer journey, we put a lot of energy and effort and design energy into figuring out how we take out the friction in the buy. Now, how do we take out the friction in the data flow? And if we can eliminate those steps, right, from when the customer comes into the top of the funnel to as they move through, and make sure that we don't have these handoffs that used to make our life easier, because we got this tool from here and that tool from there, and it's going to put a little more burden on us. But if we go through the pain now the data is clean, right? And we don't have to go through these gymnastics. And I think that's the part of it, is really doing that kind of audit, right? It's like, where are the risk points And and then you get like really geeky and open up like the inspector in your browser and see how many cookies are being loaded, and see which ones you really even know are there, and who's taking your data from your website that you don't even know you're sending it to, because somebody installed some widget you never knew they put on the site.
So you're saying my mom was right?
Well, there's two sides to this whole story, right? There's aspects of it, and I didn't mean to jump in on you, Michael, but she is absolutely right. But I don't think the answer is throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think as an industry, right, if we're given the whiteboard to design it, it would be kind of that code of conduct of how many degrees of separation are you allowed to go with the third-party cookie, right? Third-party cookies have a place. They just don't have the place of ubiquity that people perverted it into. And I think if we could dial it back, we could find a balance between privacy and performance and relevance that really solves all the needs.
Yep. You mentioned something before, it stuck with me. So you said something about CDPs. Mm-hmm. Maybe Daniel, give us a little, what is that? What is he talking about?
CDP, that's a customer data platform. This is the kind of the holy grail that marketers want to have fingertip access to all their first-party customer data. Anytime a customer has, interacted with them in any way, their sales team, their websites, there's this single source of truth for the customer and their journey with your company that you can mine. You could use it to build prospecting lists, or you can use it to build, messaging content for users, kind of a world of other things too, like centralizing customer data this way also helps you with privacy regulation, kind of gives you a single point to enforce things like CCPA and GDPR, and customers opting out of being shared with. Just CDPs in general, their goal is to kind of put all your customer data from all its individual silos into kind of one place that's easy to use, easy to access.
Got it. Okay, good. Is there an equivalent on the digital side to kind of like when we do appends, right? So in the list rentals, we have information about our customer, but then we go out, we connect with an appending type company that now has dozens of additional pieces of information about our customer. Are there sources that we know of or recommend that have that access?
Yeah, see, it's really interesting because now we start opening up what I would call is a fairly interesting gray area of the CDP, right? As soon as you start renting or buying data, and I'm an old direct marketer, right? When you start appending data to put into a CDP, it's no longer customer to company, right? And so now we're looking at a prospect list. So I'm no CDP expert, right? But I just thinking about the spirit of it. The question is, if it's not regulated today, right? When is it going to be regulated? Because I'm not sure of the long term viability of saying I'm going to use third party append sources the way I used to use for a mail list. Right, because back then, we'd get them on Cheshire labels, right? So a mail list was you'd slap it on a direct mail piece, and you couldn't reuse the name, and then it became digital, right? And now we're looking at it where it lives forever in the social space. So I wish I had a clean answer on it, but it confuses the hell out of me too.
Yeah. All right, so we'll. I want to go to each of you just with some recap, couple takeaways that people should leave with today, and then from there we'll go to some questions. So, Daniel, what are some of the key points that you just want to hammer home?
Sure. There's something that can help. Whereas Brian makes a good point about wanting to own your data and not rely on the walled gardens. In reality, Google having as much data as you can give them will help them perform better on your campaigns. The same with Facebook. One thing you can do, since they're getting less and less data from these changes, these privacy changes, and these cookie third-party cookie deprecation, is make sure your integrations with them are up to date. Google has API integrations where you're not just using the pixel on the website, but you're also connecting to them server side to create a redundant setup. Facebook has the same thing. I think it's called Conversions API on both of them. You could pass back hash PII data to these platforms to help them match on events. I guess just the takeaway is they are losing data, so make sure they have as much of yours as you can give them, so they can optimize appropriately.
Got it, Brian?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. But you're absolutely right with my belief. My first and foremost, takeaway is develop a plan to control your data. Because even in a world where you're sending conversion data to Google, right? And I just knew this, just literally I was advising a friend on this in the last week. They were sending conversion data through a top right click to call platform. The platform made a change, and not only were conversions going through to the direct Google Ads API, but then those same conversions weren't being filtered out as they should have been and being sent to Google Analytics, and their Google Ads campaign costs went through the roof because Google thought they got twice as many conversions. So, right, even if there are APIs, it doesn't mean it's right. Right? We need, again, you're responsible for your data, and if you don't understand your data, right, these things can easily happen. I think the last thing is, right, cookies aren't all bad, right? First-party cookies are critical, and third-party cookies, right? While I think the writing's on the wall, right, that they're going away, but they're not necessarily all bad either. And so, coming up with a plan to not be dependent on those walled gardens is critical. And I think, lastly, measurement and attribution shouldn't be taken out, like two kids in a sandbox trying to take their toys and go home, right? I want all the media dollars. I want all the media dollars. It's what's best for the brand, what's best for the client, and now bring it all together in one unified view.
Good. Okay, thanks. All right. Are there questions other than what the hell are you three nerds talking about? Any other besides that?
So I have questions in terms of attribution.
Thank you. Podcast. So when it comes to attribution, would you recommend a multi-touch attribution software or technology like Adobe to be able to support and be able to track the level of attribution throughout the consumer journey?
Are you speaking as like an alternative to like leveraging the big tech portals like Facebook portal and Google portal solely for your analytics?
Yeah, I'm thinking to be able to plead our case, right? Because for the most part, Google's going to take credit for everything because it's set up on a last-click interaction attribution model, right? So I think we need to have some kind of third party involved to be able to tell the truth because there's three sides to a story, right? Your side, their side, and the truth. So maybe that third party technology can maybe act as kind of the truth teller in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to run into the problem that Michael had if you just kind of take all the portals at their face. You're going to have more transactions than you actually have, and more sales than you've actually sold. So having a purpose-built application run your analytics rather than just leveraging the media vendors is a great idea.
Yeah, because we're an adtech platform, so when you look inside of our technology and it's all programmatic, and then they're like, okay, look at the Google Analytics. Google is telling this story. It's kind of like being like a mediator between, right? So.
Yeah, and something like Adobe is a good first step, right? Because just, so I think multi-touch on Adobe is better than just, three different ones from the platforms. But the question is, multi-touch is really intended to get almost to the lowest common denominator as I'm gonna split the baby, right? So I think there are better methods to get there, but it's at least better than the other alternatives.
Good question.
Anyone else?
So a marketer may have multiple agencies with siloed capabilities, like a TV agency, digital agency, et cetera, some internal capabilities, some that they're outsourcing, and so forth. What recommendations do you guys have for like setting the business rules around attribution so that all these different players can play nice?
That's good. I'll let you take that. I mean, the first thing I'm going to say ahead of that is communication across all of those people that are responsible, because that you see everywhere is so many companies are so focused, have individuals focused on their specific channels that there's a lack of communication even at a company, culturally, to allow for them to communicate. And many times it's just sitting down and having a conversation, and you look at the data and collectively agree. Seems to be where we're aligned, rather than, like you said, having to come and fight for it. But I'd like to hear the more technical response to that.
And it kind of comes back to the other question. First, I think it takes either a client to drive, like, we're going to do this, right? Or it's going to take really one of the agency partners that just to step up and know that they're going to lose, right, some of their piece of the pie, potentially, if we get a complete view. And just know that that's just going to happen. I can tell you that when things are accurately produced, what we've seen happen is budgets actually increase, right? Because things are working. We're not fighting. And coming back to the method, I'm going to say, I'll sound like a broken record. The attribution methods historically that I've used in my entire career, none of them, in my opinion, are work because they're all about single channel. That's what I was mentioning before, multi-channel counterfactual. I apologize for the geekiness of the name, but it's a different method. It's using neural networks to actually predict what would have happened if you eliminated one of the pieces, not even a whole media channel. You can be like, I'm eliminating this flight. I'm eliminating this channel, this network. I'm eliminating this campaign or this creative. And then it comes back and explains to you, this is what happened and here's why it happened. And I think it's about glass box measurement and not just here's an attribution algorithm. You got to trust the number on the other side. You need something that explains to you how it got there and why it matters. And the more data you put it into it, the better it gets and the smarter it gets. So it's a complete change of paradigm on how to look at measurement and attribution.
Last chance. All right, let's have a round.
Wait.
Eileen coming in.
This is just an easy one. On the email capture, you don't stop, give us your email with or without a incentive. What percentage conversion are you seeing on that, on the email capture? Not conversion of downstream, but I mean, how many of 100 people that go to the website, how many leave their email?
You know, I wish I had a stat for that. I don't have it offhand. I don't know if you guys.
I don't run campaigns, so I don't know.
So you're just like getting that email.
Yeah, the incentive I've seen very high. It's like over 80% from many campaigns I've seen. What's interesting is I've seen a lot of exit pop surveys. So or exit surveys, people are not purchasing, they're leaving, and then they're asking why. That used to be something like under 1%, and in more recent campaigns, and I think it's just a willingness of consumers to really want to start to give feedback. I've seen that in the 5% range, which is huge for learning. So it didn't take us a year to finally figure out why people were coming, but the data was coming a lot more quickly.
I think that'll only increase too as more and more websites are making this effort. A lot of sites are just walled completely behind an email sign up. So I think over time it'll just train the internet user to freely give up their email and know what's coming.
All right, a round of applause for these guys. Great work.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you for pulling this together. You would have never known this was the last group to come together. I mean, you guys really did a great job over the last 10 days or so, so thank you. To Brian's point, though, earlier about the party and where it's going to be, Extreme Reach is so kind to have tonight's party from 5:30 to 7:30. Gone through some back and forth. We're going to keep it outside. It's at the Eden Rock Garden and Aquatica Pool, so if you've been around the grounds at all, it's the last pool on the way out to the beach path. So if you're going out the back of the building, you go all the way down the stairs to the back, and that's why we're still able to have it. Don't be afraid when you go outside, and it's windy in your face. Down there, it's a little bit protected behind the building. Have some people out there multiple times a day, and we're going to get it going there at 5:30. So we'll see you all there. Thanks.